The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back. The four aces of Comfortably Zoned. I'm Ralph Tyko to introduce them. First of all, Hal Bock. How are you, Hal?
I'm good, Ralph.
And George Case III. How about that?
Thank you, Ralph. It is the third. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Clarifying, we had a little brain fart a few minutes ago. I introduced you as George Case. Alan Blumkin is not here yet. David Hubler called in. He may or may not be here. But we're going to go with the three of us for the moment. How about tell us what you've been writing about? Edwin Diaz, a relief pitcher with a song.
It's an electrifying moment when he comes into a game at Citi Field. First of all, he's been lights out. He's had an extraordinary season. After a terrible start here in New York when he was traded from the Mariners to the Mets, he couldn't get anybody out. He kept giving up home runs, and the fans were just awful on him and just booing him left and right. And to his credit, he stuck it out and he turned it around. And this year, 2022, which is his fourth season with the Mets, he has been lights out. He's been the best relief pitcher in baseball. And what's remarkable, not remarkable, but what's most interesting about his show is when he comes out of the bullpen, they start playing on the loudspeakers at Citi Field a tune called Narco, which I'm not terribly familiar with because my vocal favorites are Tony Bennett and Frank Sinatra, so you know how old I am. But Narco is apparently a very popular tune, and they accompany it by trumpets by a guy named Timmy Trumpet. And the fans go absolutely nuts. It's a very catchy tune. It's it's an exciting rendition, and it apparently gets Diaz all ramped up too, because he just strikes out everybody. He's had 2 strikeouts an inning in 50-some innings, or 45-some innings. So, I mean, he's just had a remarkable season. He's become the best relief pitcher in baseball from the very depths of the bullpen in 2019. So there are other relief pitchers have signature songs. I know that Mariano Rivera, who's in the Hall of Fame, had enter Sandman. And,
Mr. Sandman, right.
Right, that's right. And also Trevor Hoffman, who's also in the Hall of Fame, came into Hell's Bells, I guess it was. I don't know if they were catchier than this, but this is really a terrific show that takes place in the ninth inning when they bring in Edwin Diaz.
Well, sometimes it's not the ninth inning. Sometimes he has brought into the program of Buck Showalter, bringing him in when most needed, and that's not always a safe situation. And I think that's what turned the bullpen around early on, because last year he insisted on coming in with the adrenaline going, a safe situation. And Buck has really changed that. Can you tell me how you followed it, what Buck has meant to the Mets this year?
He's the manager of the year. There's no question in my mind that he should be the manager of the year. He has turned this team around. They play with a passion, and they're in every game. They've had a couple of games where they came from behind big deficits in the 8th, 9th innings to win games. because they don't give up. And as far as Buck and Diaz, Buck brought him in for a 6-out save a couple of weeks ago, which was the first time in his career that Diaz had done that. But Buck's perspective is, I have to win this game today. I'm not going to worry about tomorrow. I don't know if I'll have him, I won't have him, whatever. But today's game, we have to win. And if we have to bring Diaz in the 8th inning instead of the 9th, well, that's what we're going to do. And that's the way he manages. He does not go by the book. He goes by the seat of his pants. And he's in every game. He knows the rule book inside and out. And he's just been remarkable. He's the manager of the year. There's no question in my mind.
Okay. Let me call on George Case. Your dad played in the majors in the 30s and 40s. What was a relief pitcher's role back then, and how has it changed?
Well, Ralph, I'm glad you asked me that, because I had made some notes. I wanted to think about it, what Hal was talking about, because certainly the strategy and the way baseball is played today is totally different from when my dad played. And when my dad played, starting pitchers were expected to start and finish games. And, the relievers were brought in if the pitcher was struggling either with his control or location or hurt his arm or whatever, then they would bring a reliever in. But the starters were being paid to start and finish games. And I just made a couple of notes and compared it with what we're seeing today in baseball. Two of the greatest pitchers from the era that my dad played, in the National League, Warren Spahn, had a total of 382 complete games, which is a huge number.
Shit.
Bob Feller had 279 complete games. So, Feller in the American League, Spahn in the National League, two of the greatest pitchers, both in the Hall of Fame. But that's the way baseball was played back then. Now, you look today, and, with Diaz and the way the pitch counts are totaled today and the number of complete games, with the Mets, they've got two of the really good pitchers, in Scherzer and DeGrom. Between the two of them, and this is just indicative of what's happening today, between the two of them, they have a total of 16 complete games. 16. In the American League, Justin Verlander, who's one of the top pitchers in the American League, has a total of 26 complete games out of 475 starts. So, it's a totally different world today. You have pitch counts, you have relievers coming in to be, whether it be a middle reliever, whether it be a closer, you're probably going to get at least 3 pitchers a game. And the starting pitchers are asked to have a quality start if they can get 6 innings, 7 innings, but they know they're going to be taken out because the pitch counts, and the way the strategy is today is that the pitchers are supposed to throw hard for as long as they can go, and if that's 6 innings or 7 innings, and then the relievers come in throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs or whatever it is, and if they've got good control and they're being challenged to either hold a lead or get the other side out, that's what they do. And in an earlier era, I can tell you for a fact, managers would never consider ever going out to make a change to some of these starting pitchers. They'd be told to get their rear end back in the dugout because that guy's not coming out. It's just a totally different world today.
The last pitcher I remember doing that and having that kind of control over the manager's decision was Bob Gibson.
Right. I think you're probably right, Ralph. He was what, you and I and, David and Hal and Alan, we're old school. But Bob Gibson was definitely old school. He was out there. That was his place, and don't even try to take him out because he ain't coming out. And Early Wynn was another one the same way. At the end of his career, Early was looking for relief help to get his 300th win because he was out of gas. But during the height of his career, don't ever go out there and think you're going to take him out because he's not coming.
There's a famous story about Gibson with his catcher, Tim McCarver, who later was a great broadcaster, baseball broadcaster. And Gibson was struggling a little bit, which was unusual for him. And McCarver came out to the mound to, kind of calm him down, give him a chance to catch his breath and so forth. McCarver arrives at the mound, and Gibson looks at him and says, "What are you doing here? The only thing you know about pitching is you can't hit it." McCarver made a U-turn and went back behind the plate.
That's a great story, Hal. That's terrific.
Thank you.
That's very indicative of the mentality. 30, 40 years ago when the starters, they were very proud guys, and they were expected to be out there, start and finish games, and they wouldn't come out unless they knew they were either getting hit, hurt, or really having problems. They expected to finish the game.
The guy I thought of was a teammate, a coaching teammate of your dad's, and that was Early Wynn.
Right, yes.
Was he along the same lines as that?
Yeah, that's what I had mentioned now. Ralph, Early Wynn was, he got 300 wins. His last major league victory was 300, and they really helped him. I think he pitched like 5 innings to get the win. But before that, during his prime, he never wanted to come out of a ball game. He just didn't want to do it, and the managers knew that, and they would not go out there. Today, it's pretty much accepted, and Hal has really hit upon it, the way the guys come in with, with their music and all that kind of stuff. And I think Mariano Rivera probably, was indicative of that whole thing with the walking music with Mr. Sandman, because he'd put the other team to sleep as a closer. But the thing is that it was just a different world. And the major league pitchers were expected to start and finish. And today, very, very, very few complete games, because the pitchers know they go out there to pitch for 6 innings and throw as hard as they can, but there's guys behind them that are going to come in and do the mop-up and hold the other team down.
Evidence of how it's changed, there are some great, great players in the Hall of Fame. We both agree on that.
Right.
And until he came along, no player had been unanimous in the voting for the Hall of Fame. Mariano Rivera was the first and only unanimous choice. So that gives you an idea of the impact that he had when he played. And he played recently. He played in my lifetime. He's not from the bad Babe Ruth era,
Right. That's exactly right, Al.
So that gives you a good idea of how the game has changed.
Yeah, and I think that's a recent change in the strategy. And Rivera, whether it was conscious or not conscious, but that certainly changed the thinking for relievers. And, you'd come in there. I don't think anybody was doing pitch counts on the starters, but they knew they had to bring him in to shut the other team down or preserve a win. And he was the best in the world at what he did. And you're absolutely right, Hal. I think he was the first, and maybe he's the only unanimous selection for the Hall of Fame.
It's true, he was. And what's interesting? I grew up in the 50s, 40s and 50s, and in those days, relief pitchers were broken down starters. They were pitchers who no longer could start and give you a credible performance, but they could come in and get an out here and there or an inning here and there. There's another famous story about a relief pitcher, and Ralph probably knows this one, but I'll repeat it anyway. In the 1954 World Series, the Giants played the Cleveland Indians, and the Indians had a guy named Vic Wirtz, a left-handed hitter, coming to the plate with 2 runners on base. And the Giants brought in a little left-handed pitcher named Don Little. And so They wanted a left-hander against a left-handed hitter. Well, Wirtz hit the ball maybe 450 feet. I mean, it was a shot. And Willie Mays kept running and running and running and caught it over his shoulder like a wide receiver. One of the greatest catches in World Series history. And now the manager comes out of the dugout, Leo DeRocha comes out of the dugout to get Little and bring in a guy named Marv Grissom, who's also a broken-down starter. And,
Uncle Marv.
Yeah, Grissom gets to the mound, and Little looks at him and he says, "Well, I got my man."
That's another great story. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. It's what I do. I'm a storyteller.
Of the
That's
highest
okay.
quality.
Hal, you and I and Ralph remember a lot of things about the way the game used to be, and I have to be honest, I really have lost so much touch and interest in the current game. I'm just not well spoken on it. I can talk forever about the old days, I guess, but I have a problem with the way baseball is played today. I just don't have the same fervor and interest that I used to, because to me the game has changed so dramatically.
You know that the Yankees won a game the other night when their shortstop, a guy named Kiner Falafel, I guess his name is, pushed a safety squeeze bunt. When's the last time you saw one of those?
I know. It's been years, and maybe a lot of people wouldn't even know what a safety squeeze
You're
is.
absolutely right. And the winning run scored.
Right.
So, I mean, that gives you an idea of how the game has changed. It was so unusual and so outrageous to see that happen. But,
right.
Well, little by little, they're trying to beat the shift. I know Showalter has bunted with Guillerme a number of times, and
well, they should do that. They should do that.
Of course.
I mean, you know, a little before my time, not a lot, but a little before my time, there was a player named Willie Keeler.
Right.
And Willie Keeler's slogan was "Hit 'em where they ain't,"
right.
which is a very good practice if you think about it.
Yep.
And that's the solution to the shift. If there are three guys on the right side of the infield, I'm going to hit it to the left side of the infield, or the left side of the field.
It sure makes sense. It sure makes sense.
And if I can't, then I shouldn't be in the major leagues.
Right.
You keep hearing the stories. I keep hearing stories of, well, guys are taught this pull. They don't know how to hit the other way.
Right.
Well, I know a player named Don Mueller who played for my Giants. They called him Mandrake the Magician because he could hit the ball to all fields. And you should be able to hit the ball to all fields if you're a major league ball player. That's my view.
But
no, I agree with you, Hal.
It isn't the stroke
that's the kind of game. That's the kind of game that I grew up watching, playing. I mean, that's what I was taught by my father at a very early age. You know, go the other way. If you have to, go the other way. It's no, you know, knack on your ability if you're a pull hitter. But if necessary, and you say that you have to go and hit behind the runner, that's what you do. You change your stride, you choke up on the bat, you do whatever you have to do to move the ball to the opposite field.
That's part of the science of baseball.
Right.
Okay.
But there are not many players who can do it, apparently.
It's not the players' fault of today. It's the instruction they get in the minor leagues. You're taught to hit a home run or strike out. That's basically the philosophy of baseball. And I miss those days of get them on, get them over, and get them in. And
right.
A good at-bat was if you hit a ground ball to the right side of the infield with a runner on first, you get the guy in scoring position.
Right.
And that was the name of the game. And that's called strategy. That's what I miss in today's game.
I agree. Ralph, I agree with you. Absolutely agree with you. And a couple of things. I mean, I don't want to belabor it about my dad, but another great hitter, a contact hitter, a couple of them, and they both choked up, and they were terrific hitters, not power hitters, because that was not their job. But Richie Ashburn choked up, great hitter, and Nellie Fox. Those two guys were the epitome of what a contact hitter should be. I'm telling you that they didn't get up there with a thin-handle bat with 2 strikes and still trying to jack one out. They didn't do it. Their job, as you said, get him in, get him over, get him on. I mean, that's what they did. And they were 2 of the best that ever played the game. They both choked up. They both used thick-handle bats. Today, I look at the guys that are up at the plate today. They got the thin handles. They're out there swinging with 2 strikes, still trying to hit one out. And as a result, the strikeouts are horrendous. I mean, guys used to take offense if they struck out. Well, now they just accept it. Well, I didn't get it. I'll get it next time. But, you know, if I hit a home run, everybody goes crazy. That's just the way the game's played today.
You know, George made a good point earlier about pitchers throwing 5-6 innings today, and that was it. That's their complete games in the modern era. But here's a question for you guys, and it's something that I've wondered about. If they're throwing 5 or 6 innings, that means they're throwing less than they were in our heyday, the Warren Spahn early win heyday. They're throwing less pitches, they're throwing less innings. So how come all of these guys, many of these guys, wind up with Tommy John surgery? The pitchers of our day did not. They just
because they're pitching out of their body and trying to break 100. That's not natural. Throwing 100 miles an hour every pitch, and that I think it's that. It's maybe improper stretching. I think it's a combination of the two. The training is not there, and if you're going for it all for 5 innings, you know, I remember the first 100-mile-an-hour guys that I heard of was Bob Feller, and they had a horse. They had some sort of device to measure how fast he was throwing, and it was a big deal, 100 miles an hour. But how many times did he throw 100 miles an hour?
Well, Ralph, that's an issue, a big issue. Pitchers back then, I mentioned about Feller and Spahn and those guys, Gibson. They paced themselves. They weren't trying to overpower a hitter every time the guy came up. You know, if they knew they were going to be there for 9 innings, you had to get a certain pitch or whatever. That's what they did. They reared back and let one go. But they also depended upon changing speeds. They depended upon using their slider. They depended upon location. That's what they did. That's what a starting pitcher, they learned how to pitch. You know, today the emphasis is on speed, so if guys are throwing 100 miles an hour, that's one thing, but they're only throwing it for like 5 or 6 innings, what Hal's talking about. But the injuries there are. And I don't know whether it's the weight training, whether they're doing too much weight training, or they're just not doing all the stuff that they used to do. You know, players, when my dad was playing, pitchers, I mean, on an off day, they were even throwing batting practice. And, you know, today they wouldn't do it. But back then they did. They threw batting practice, and I know Nolan Ryan, he maintained, and he's a current pitcher. You know, you guys certainly would be familiar with, you know, when he was pitching with the Mets and Houston and all that kind of stuff. But Nolan Ryan, I mean, with the Texas Rangers, Nolan Ryan maintained that the pitchers strengthen their arms by pitching. And if the guys are throwing and they learn how to pitch and they're using the proper technique, that's one thing. The other thing that's changed as far as I'm concerned, and I don't know the mechanics and why they do it, but if you watch starting pitchers today, they all pretty much pitch from the same position. They go from a set position, not a full windup. Back in Walter Johnson, Bob Feller, early Wynn, you know, Satchel Paige, all those guys, they did a full windup. And that's the way the pitchers used to do, where they would get their whole body, the momentum carrying them forward with their windup. Today, they've gone from a set position, very little movement of their body. Just they get the ball, they look it in, they have it in their glove, and they start and they throw. And it's just, again, different pitching mechanics, but I agree with what you said, Ralph. There's a tremendous amount of injuries, shoulder injuries, Tommy John surgeries, and all that kind of stuff. And one of the guys I mentioned today was, what's his name, DeGrom. He's only 2-0. He's been hurt most of the year.
And most of last year also.
Right. Yep, exactly.
Well, there's a pitcher that the Yankees came up with named Michael King. He's a relief pitcher, and he's been very effective for them, late inning relief pitcher. And so he doesn't have a lot of innings because he's only pitching 1 or 2 innings in each appearance.
Right.
He winds up the other night to throw a pitch, and his elbow breaks. He broke his elbow.
Whoa. Now,
what do you make of that?
Yeah, that's a brutal injury. Jesus, that's something happened. I can see, obviously with arms and shoulders and stuff, but to break an elbow,
yep.
He must have put a tremendous amount of torque or something on his elbow, throwing a curveball or something to make that happen.
So now this kid's he underwent surgery, and you have to wonder about his future, whether he'll be able to come back.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of these guys who undergo Tommy John surgery are coming back stronger than they ever were. And case can be made for that. A lot of high school kids get it before even being drafted.
Well, Ralph, on that subject, what drives me crazy, a lot of the young pitchers today, their parents or coaches or whatever are recommended Tommy John surgery, whether they need it or not. It's almost like a preventative. To me, that is absolutely crazy.
It's cruel. It's cruel, actually. You're going to put a kid through major surgery for that? That's crazy.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Okay. I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you individually. Who was the first relief pitcher who was a star? And I'm guessing you might say 1950. Bock?
Well, I believe it was 1951 that the Giants came up with a knuckleball pitcher named Hoyt Wilhelm. He's in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
And he hit a home run in his first at bat. Never hit another home run. Little
Hal, that was 1952 when he came up.
52. The Dodgers came up with Joe Black, who won 15 games, and I think he saved 15 games that season. And he was their answer to Hoyt Wilhelm.
Well, I'm thinking of Constanti.
Oh, yes, 1950.
Yes.
That's 1950, right. Jim Constanti.
Right.
Who, by the way, after being the terrific fireman, terrific relief pitcher for that year for the Whiz Kids Phillies, he started the first game of the World Series.
Yeah, he sure did.
Against the Yankees. Right. So you're right about Constanti. I had forgotten him.
Well, you know what, Hal? And Ralph, Constanti was great, no question about it. But he was the surprise starter for Game 1 of that World Series because Kurt Simmons had been called into National Guard or something and wasn't available, and Eddie Sawyer was sort of stuck. He was the manager, and he wanted to pitch Robin Roberts the second game. Roberts needed to rest the game before, so he really had no option. And he brings in Constanti, and Constanti did a great job. I think he got beat, 2-1 or 1-0, something like that. But he really was a very effective pitcher. And then, interesting for me, my dad managed up in Oneonta, and just the same place where Buck Showalter later managed, the Oneonta Yankees in the New York Penn League. But Jim Constanti had a sporting goods store in Oneonta, New York, and that's what he retired to after baseball. And my dad was managing the Oneonta Yankees at that time, and he and Constanti became very good friends.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, what a baseball connect. Incredible. talk about Ryan Duran for a moment, guys. How about?
Go ahead, Hal. A lot of funny stories about Ryan Duran.
Ryan Duran had Coke bottle eyeglasses, like very thick eyeglasses. He was a very effective relief pitcher for the Yankees, but he had a routine. He would come into the game, and he threw, you were talking about 100 miles an hour earlier. He was a 100-mile-an-hour pitcher in an era when it was unusual. It was not the norm.
Right.
So Duran would come into the game, and routinely he would throw with these. First of all, he's wearing these thick glasses, and you're thinking, can he really see what he's doing? And he would throw the first pitch 9 feet over the catcher's head. And the batter's standing there, and he's thinking, oh, my God, he doesn't know what he's doing. He can't see, and he's throwing 100 miles an hour, and I got to go stand in against him. That's not going to be good. But that was Ryan Duran's routine.
Oh, it was, and absolutely, Hal, it was really funny because that's what he did. And those batters up there are saying, "God, I hope he can see me."
That's right.
The only person that didn't fear Ryan Duran was the manager of. He was a coach then, but he later became the manager of the Yankees, a war hero.
Ralph Houck.
Ralph Houck. Ryan Duran put a cigar out. They had a big argument, and I think Ryan Duran, in his heyday of drinking, tried to squish Ralph Houck's cigar. Now, Ralph Houck was a war hero.
Battle of the Bulge.
And those people like Hank Bauer, Yogi Berra, they took no shit. You were in World War II, and you didn't really. It wasn't, the big leagues weren't pressureful for you because you've had the ultimate pressure. And I remember Duran messed with Ralph Houck and suffered the consequences. Let's put it that way.
I had occasion to tell a story that involved me and Ralph Houck the other day. I was a kid, like rookie baseball writer Hal Bock, and they sent me to Yankee Stadium. And this is after the Yankee dynasty has fallen on hard times, and Houck came down out of the front office to manage to try and straighten things out. The problem was they all got old. All the players had gotten old on them, and they hadn't replaced them. So now the protocol in those days for us was when you got to the stadium, you would call the office and ask if there were any special requests. After all, I worked for the Associated Press, 1,500 member newspapers around the world. Okay, so I call the office and I get a request. What's the request? A member in Springfield, Massachusetts, which is Red Sox country, wants me to ask how come he hasn't been able to straighten out the Yankees. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, this is like putting a firecracker in my mouth. But listen, I work for the AP, I follow orders. So I cover the game, and thank God the Yankees happened to win that game, so he was in a better mood than he might otherwise have been. And we all go into the office after the game, into his office. And I let the regulars ask their questions. Maury Allen, Dick Young, Jack Lang, everybody ask your questions. I'll just sit here and wait. And all the questions are asked, and Houck is still sitting there with his cigar. And Al Bock steps up. My moment. And I said to him, Ralph, I want to explain to you that I'm asking you a question that was relayed to us from a member in Springfield, Massachusetts. It's not my question. It's his question. I'm just a messenger. And Houck has no idea what I'm talking about and doesn't care. And so there I go. I pop the question. Houck jumps up out of his chair, and he gets right into my face. And he starts calling me names, words that I had never heard before. Really. And so I figure, well, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of his office. So I back out of his office and I get into the clubhouse. He follows me into the clubhouse and he's still yelling at me. Now, Mickey Mantle, Whitey Ford, they're all looking. What is going on? Why is Hulk in that kid's face? Okay, I escaped in one piece, thank God. And the next night, I'm at Yankee Stadium. Next game, I'm home, back on the scene, and I'm up at the batting cage before the game, watching the batting practice. And Hal comes over to me, and I think, oh my God, he's going to kill me. This is it, you know. And he comes over to me and he says, "Hey kid, I'm sorry about last night." And I was so flabbergasted, I don't know if I said anything to him at that moment. But it was quite an experience. Ralph Houck was a tough customer, let me tell you. And listen, if you fight in the Battle of the Bulge, you would be expected to be a tough customer.
That's right.
Exactly.
Well, he did. What was his nickname? Was Major, I think, right?
That's right. Major was his name. Yeah.
Right. Right. Yep.
If I'm not mistaken, Warren Spahn fought in that battle as well.
Yes, he did. You're right. Yeah. And then, after he fought in that battle, came back to baseball and became the winningest left-handed pitcher in the history of the game.
And starting at age 26.
Right. Yeah, believe it or not, I had mentioned about Spahn. Believe it or not, Hal and Ralph, he had 363 career wins.
Right.
Which is an unbelievable number, and especially like what you guys are talking. This was him coming back after the war, not that he took time off and he was pitching before the war. This was all those numbers were all those years that he pitched in the major leagues after his military service.
Remarkable.
Hal, tell the story. I'm sure you know it. If you don't tell it, I will. About Warren Spahn talking about Casey Stengel and their experience.
Well, he had been with the Boston Braves before the war,
right?
And Casey was the manager of the Braves, and I don't know the details, Ralph. Why don't you tell the story?
Well, basically, what he said was, it's not really a story. It was a quip. But
I knew him when he wasn't so smart.
Right. I remember I knew Casey before and after he was a genius, because Warren Spahn combined with Yogi Berra to pitch for the Mets. They were the oldest backstop in history, if I'm not mistaken, or some such statistic. And the Mets were genius inspiring in those days.
We talked before about the first relief pitchers, and we mentioned Constanti, which is correct. Casey became the manager of the Yankees in 1949, and I remember, being an old guy that I am, I remember that he had a left-handed relief pitcher named Joe Page, who would just jump over the little fence in the bullpen to come into the game. You kind of skip over the fence. He was not in the class of the players that we've mentioned, Wilhelm and Joe Black and Constanti, but he had an act. He would do this little skip over the fence and to come into the game, and he was a pretty good relief pitcher for Casey in the dynasty years from 1949 to 1953.
You know, one of those guys, it might have been Page, broke his wrist jumping that fence.
That's possible.
I don't remember who it was, but that's something to put in my notebook to follow up on.
That's certainly possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
They've had a lot of crazy injuries in baseball, but that at least could be related to doing that. But some of them have, they've injured themselves doing their barbecues, or they've done crazy stuff because they hurt themselves, and their agents tell them, well, you just sit out for a while, get better. Different world today from what it was back then.
Yep, that's right.
I've seen YouTube videos of Diaz preparing to come in, taken from the bullpen, and he goes through a routine of he looked like Jesus Alou and Clemente, getting his body, just right, twitching around. He's a character.
Well, he's very effective for them. He's been terrific.
They're talking about Cy Young.
They are,
so
yeah.
That would be great. Hey, guys, David Hubler did not join us, and I don't know about Al Blumkin. Hope he's all right. I hope everybody's all right. But we had a terrific podcast. And,
well, I know I enjoyed it, and Hal, you gave us a good starting point with you're talking about relief pitchers. So it is different, and I enjoyed it today, talking about a lot of the old days. But it certainly is a different world in Major League Baseball today.
No question about it.
Well, let me tell you, one of my biggest challenges is trying to keep up with you guys. And you are both incredible memories, and I love this. Keep coming back. We'll keep doing this every month, and just know that if it ain't fun, it shouldn't be getting done, and we're having fun. So. Thank you, Hal Bock. Thank you, George Case III. No relation to George Grimm. And
well, baseball-wise, I guess we have a similarity, but
the
first names are the same anyhow. So.
Right. Me introducing you as George Grimm in take one didn't exactly boost my confidence. If I'm trying to keep up with these guys, I should know their freaking names.
Hey, Ralph, I've been called a lot of bad names. That's no problem. Don't worry about it.
I would say that that's not true. That you and your dad were never really called bad names. Am I right?
I'm just kidding about that. But the thing is that baseball,
except by Stanley Pearson.
Yeah, right. There you go. Hey, I'm going to bring out one other name real quick. I know you want to end up. But being a Philadelphia guy, there was a guy who was a relief pitcher, and Hal, you might remember him, Mitch Williams.
Sure.
Oh, yes.
And he would come on. I mean, he had no idea where the plate was. And when he would come in, his introductory music was a song called Mr. It's called The Wild Thing. And he was so wild. I mean, he blew more games than they would all the fans would scream and holler when Mitch Williams came in because, he came in the game, but he came into the song The Wild Thing, and that's what they used to call him.
All right. Now, here's a trivia question. I signed Mitch Williams to his Topps contract in Reno, Nevada.
Wow.
And the manager of that team was a former relief pitcher with the Yankees, Eli Gerber.
Oh, sure.
Yep.
And Eli was a terrific guy, rest his soul.
No, he was. Eli just passed away about a year ago, 2 years ago, and actually pitched for my dad in Hawaii. And I really I did not. I remembered Eli when he was pitching with the Angels, but I did not remember that he pitched for my father in Hawaii. And Eli saw one of my posts on Facebook, and he got a hold of me. He said, "Yeah, George," he said, I pitched for your dad, so I didn't even know it. But he was a terrific pitcher. Funny name, GRBA.
Right.
But he was a terrific guy, and like I say, he passed away maybe a year ago, maybe a little bit longer. But he was very effective during his prime.
Well, Hal may appreciate this story more than George, but Eli told it to me. He said when he came up with another pitcher, John Gabler,
right.
And he had the delis in New York fooled into thinking that they were both Jewish. And neither of them were, but they had pastrami sandwiches as much as you can eat. No chops for you because you're one of us. And Eli would say, "Got over that, Jew boy," knowing that I was Jewish.
Yeah. That's another terrific story, Ralph. I never heard that one before. That's great.
All right. Hey, I got to keep up with you guys. That was the reason.
Well,
all right.
I enjoyed it tonight, guys. Thank you very much.
I did as usual. Thank you, Hal. Thank you, George. Right. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I am Ralph Tyko, the weak link of it all.
Good night, everybody.
Adios,
good night, everybody. Good night.
Adios, and happy trails.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices, and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.